Vielen Dank, David.
Thank you, David. We have 2 questions in German already that people posted. I'll read them out to you.
Die erste Frage, das sind relativ lang.
The first question, well, both actually are fairly long. First question is long and has sub-questions. This is about a boy with an optic disc, coloboma, and glasses. And the question is the optic disc coloboma the same as the retinal coloboma? If not, what's the difference?
Yeah, if you think about the picture I showed, the retina is a very large area. The whole inside the eye, the whole back, the top, bottom, and the sides is all lined with retina. So it's a very big area. If we go back to that picture with the 2 red and white eyes, way back, a long way back. There, that one. Now, if you look at the retina, look at the eye on the left, you will see that the optic nerve is at the back of the eye. The optic disc is where the optic nerve is joined to the retina, but the macula is separate. It's different. It's a little bit to the side, as you can see in the picture. And the macula is where you have your fine vision. So it's possible for a coloboma, like in the picture on the right, that coloboma includes the optic disc, but it also includes the macula. So the optic disc and the macula are both missing. But it's possible that the coloboma could cover the optic disc, but the macula could still be there. I don't have a picture to show that, but that would be possible. And the big problem is if the macula is missing, because it's the macula that gives you that focus of very fine visual detail for discrimination. So if my question would be for your child, if the coloboma includes the optic disc, does it also include the macula? Because if it doesn't, he has the possibility of fine visual discrimination.
Das gleiche Kind, David.
Same child, still David. Is it typical of CHARGE for visual acuity to keep getting worse?
Well, unfortunately, for reasons we don't know, both vision and hearing can degenerate sometimes for some people with CHARGE. Sometimes the degeneration can be dramatic. Sometimes it can be very gradual. Sometimes it can happen as a child or as a teenager or as an adult. And we don't totally know the reasons. We do know that vision and or hearing can deteriorate as a result of major impact to the head banging, or something that really impacts the head. And of course, with vision, we do know if the retina detaches that the vision is going to disappear in the eye. But visual acuity, which is how well you can focus, how clearly you can see things when you look at them, that can vary in all of us. All of us, if we get very tired, our visual acuity isn't so good. All of us, if we get very stressed and very anxious, our visual acuity isn't so good. We don't go blind, but we don't see as clearly because the function is very dependent on everything being just right and us being at our best. So I think all the children, if they get stressed, if they get anxious, if they get over-aroused, or if they get very tired, you will see a falling off in their functional visual skills or their functional hearing. That would be normal. The worry is if it's a deterioration that becomes more permanent. And listening to Kim Blake, I love Kim Blake so much, and listening to her this morning, how often she says, ask your ear, nose, and throat, ask the dietitian, ask the GI doc, and all the time she's saying, go to your specialist. And I have to say the same. And the last thing you as parents want is to be told to see more specialists more often. But I do think the eye specialist needs to be involved. Sadly, as I implied at the beginning of this session, they usually don't know about charge, and they usually are in a hurry, and they usually don't really understand the multiple layers of difficulty that children with charge have with functional vision. But it is good to have them look at the retina at least once a year to see how it looks.
It's still the same child, but maybe that has already been answered now. It says here for about half a year now, the boy always pinches his eye, closes it when eating or when we're in the car, and as soon as we take off his glasses, he doesn't do it any longer.
Yeah, that's good observation. And there could be all kinds of explanations. This is a situation where you really need to know the child. I did a big charge session on Zoom with parents in New York on Thursday night. And I said at the beginning, I'm here to deal with your questions, but if you ask me very specific questions, I don't know the child, so I can't say anything very specific, only guesses. And this is a case like that. I don't know him, but the mere fact you've observed this and really noticed it is a good sign, because it means you're really paying attention, and that's where all the good stuff comes from, is paying attention. It might be a problem with light. It might be difficulty with movement, especially in the car. I know a lot of children who take their glasses off in the car, and they often close their eyes in the car, or they cover their eyes, or they pull their hat down over their eyes because of movement and flashing lights and that kind of thing. So I can't say anything more definite, but it's a very interesting observation. And if you can work out why it's happening, that might help you help him in other ways as well.
Die nächste Frage, David.
Next question, David. Children with retinal coloboma, can they and should they work under black light? Can it be hazardous, dangerous, or harmful, or should I prevent a child with a retinal coloboma from looking closely into a bright light if the kid likes doing it, for example, into a beamer? And does it make sense to put children upright if they can't stand on their own, or rather wait until they can do it on their own?
Yeah, good. That's a good question. There's no problem with black light, as far as I'm aware. I do know some children with charge who like to stare into very bright light, and that's obviously a bad idea. It's more common in other children with visual impairment, not charge, in my experience. But sometimes kids with charge do it, and I think it's good to try and minimize their opportunities for doing that. I mean, if you're outside and the sun's shining, that's tricky. If you can get them to wear a hat with a visor or dark glasses, or you can just keep them away from the direct sun, it's not a good idea. Now, I especially like your question about being upright. I noticed how often Kim talked about gravity helping with digestion, and how ideally you want the children more upright. And we all want the children more upright, but charge brings with it specific problems, especially with low muscle tone and damaged vestibular sense in the inner ears, which is why being upright is so challenging for them, and why postural control develops very late and very slowly. And I think as I've already said, we need to do everything we can with help from the physical therapist and the occupational therapist and the gym teacher and the swimming instructor. We need to do as much as we can to improve muscle strength, to improve body control, postural control. But lots of things the child needs to do and needs to learn would be more effective if they're lying on their back or on their side, or if they're leaning back against a cushion. We shouldn't be too keen to always, like schools, they always want children on chairs at tables because this is normal. Well, one of the interesting things about charge is if you look at a child carefully, if they don't feel their body very well, and if they have poor postural control, they may have two favorite positions. One will be flat on their back, but the other one might be standing up. They may well follow a lesson better if they have a high desk and they can stand and lean on it. Because when they're standing, they feel their body much better because gravity is pulling. All those joints are being compressed by gravity. And that gives them a better idea where their body is and what their body is doing. So, as I keep saying, look at the child. You know, they're giving you the information, but we're too keen to do our things. And we need to get away from that. We need to get a good balance. And the trouble with getting a good balance is it's really hard to do. And you have to keep thinking about it and changing it all the time because nothing stands still.
Thank you, David. The next question is also an interesting one. It's about a girl. She's been examined various times by the ophthalmologist, nothing particularly striking. As a young child, as a baby, she always used to throw herself back and looked backwards. She always fixated on light sources. Now she's 1 year old and is well able to fix her gaze on objects or persons in the room. May it still be that she has impairments regarding her visual field? How to find out is the question.
Well, the first obvious recommendation would be an ophthalmology examination of the eyes, you know, where they put drops in the eye and everything opens up. And then you're supposed to put your chin on the thing and the bright lights come and they see a lot of the inside of the eye. Now, with someone that young, you can't do that. You can dilate the eyes with drops, and then you probably have to get on the floor and play and try and look into the eyes. And a good pediatric ophthalmologist would be able to do that. I've been to hospitals where the doctor just gets on the floor and rolls around with the child, and they do a brilliant assessment and observation. So first to look into the eye, because retinal colobomas are very common in charge, you do need the eye to be examined to see if that's a problem. And then a skilled ophthalmologist or an optometrist, again, would be able to play with the child and presenting toys to test visual field. You know, if you come from the side of the child, how far up do you have to bring the Mickey Mouse toy before the child notices to see if there's peripheral field loss? And then look for eccentric viewing. When you do have a toy that the child likes and you show it to them, can you see them looking directly, or do they look above or to the side, like I talked about? Those kinds of things. The behaviors you describe, extending back and looking at bright light, are very common. The extending back is because they are so challenged by gravity because of the vestibular problem, which is made worse by poor vision. And also they probably have breathing difficulties and they're not feeling their bodies very effectively. So their natural urge is to get flat on the floor and not just lie on the floor, but almost melt into the floor to be as secure as possible so they're not going to fall over. And the bright light fixation, I think, is fairly normal in early infancy. Light is what vision is, if there's no light at all, you don't see anything. But in children with charge, gazing at bright light is reasonably unusual as the children get older. Some children get fixed on it, and to me that suggests they have very poor vision. And they're regarding their vision as primarily just to get light stimulation. But that's a minority issue. But at her age, I wouldn't be surprised if she's still light gazing as a developmental behavior. But I don't know her. So.
David, wir haben auch wieder ein Mädchen.
We've got another question, David, about a girl, 10 months old. She has retinal coloboma bilaterally, several small ones. Whether the macula is affected or not cannot yet be told. The ophthalmologists keep saying that it cannot yet be assessed how much the girl can see, and also whether she may need glasses or not. Nobody can tell yet. From when on can you know?
I think it's quite good to assume that the child might need glasses and try. I've been in examinations in ophthalmology clinics where they have a selection of glasses, and they try them on the baby just to see what happens. And I think of one case, they put them on a child who was about 7 months old, and the difference was breathtaking. I mean, the child froze completely, and then a big smile came on her face. Well, nobody thought she had poor visual acuity, but once these glasses went on and corrected things, it was obvious that she was suddenly seeing much more clearly. The start of your question, something I forgot to say, when the ophthalmologist looks into the eyes, they should give you either a drawing or a photograph of what they see. If they see a retinal coloboma, they should be able to draw. They often have sheets of paper with two empty circles on, and one is the left eye and one is the right. And as they're looking into the eye, they can draw the coloboma, so you get an idea of how big it is, what shape it is, and where it is on the retina. Is it like in the middle? Is it right at the very bottom? And you mentioned a couple of small colobomas, which is great observation by the doctor. So there might be a few small ones which usually don't present a visual field problem, but they should give you a drawing or a photograph, and they usually don't. I used to go on about this in England all the time. And then I got to California where I thought everything was perfect, and it was even worse here. And I'm always saying to families, when you go to ophthalmology, ask them to draw a picture or take a photo through the ophthalmoscope, because they have cameras in them, to give you so that you can show it to the teachers and explain where the visual field is missing in the eye. It's a very easy thing to do, but they don't do it. And we need to know where those coloboma are. Just saying she's got retinal coloboma doesn't help me a lot. So I would advise that. And you can do that from a baby. You know, they don't have to be 5 or 6 for the ophthalmologist to see the coloboma.
David, noch eine Frage.
David, there's another question on diagnosing a retinal coloboma. There is a little boy who was diagnosed with a retinal coloboma, 1 year old, and now the ophthalmologist no longer diagnosed it. Question, is it more difficult to diagnose with smaller children rather than with larger ones or with adults?
It's definitely harder to diagnose because they don't they don't comply. You know, they're not going to put their chin on the machine and keep still while the doctor does this with his fingers. You know, so you're probably going to have to play on the floor. Colobomas don't get better, and they don't disappear. And we have no medical treatment to get rid of coloboma. We can't do a retinal implant, you know, to build a full retina. One day we might, but at the moment we can't. And I think if they went, I mean, it's possible they thought they saw a coloboma and they didn't. And now they're getting a better idea and they can see that there isn't a coloboma. And it's equally, the reverse is possible. They did see a coloboma and now they're finding it difficult to get the child's compliance, so they don't see it. That's all I can say, really. I just see somebody from Oberlin House in Potsdam, and I want to say hello because I've got happy memories. And we also have somebody from Italy. I have to talk next week about an Italian charge conference, I hear, possibly.
Ich hätte hier einen Jungen, 17
Great, there's another
Monate
boy
alt,
here, 17 months old. Coloboma in connection with, what is it? Opticus dysplasia and the morning glory syndrome. Do you have any experience with children like that?
Optic dysplasia, yes. I've never heard of morning glory syndrome. That's a new one on me. I've never heard of optic dysplasia in a child with charge. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but I've worked with a lot of children in almost 40 years. So I would say optic nerve dysplasia is fairly unusual. I would want to check with the ophthalmologist to, is it optic nerve dysplasia or is it a coloboma that affects the optic nerve, which would be much more typical of charge. And I should say, some of my comments might sound like criticism of the doctors, and I don't mean that, but charge is very complicated. And the more time goes by, the more complicated we realize it is. And, when you go to the ophthalmologist, they don't have a lot of time. They don't have a lot of energy. And it has to be fairly quick. And they only catch your child in that little bit of time when they're with them. So it's usually not the best time to see the child and examine them. But I would want more information about the optic nerve hyperplasia or dysplasia to see if that really is what it is, or is it an issue of a retinal coloboma?
Ich sehe jetzt noch eine Frage aktuell.
I can see one more question right now. It's a girl, 6 months old, and because of coloboma in both eyes, she has no macula. Will she still be able to learn sign language, or would that be too much detail?
So she has no macula in both eyes, presumably.
That's what the question says, yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, I don't know her, and I don't know how she's going to develop. And children who don't have maculas, some of them are very blind, and some of them are alpha children. They are powerful self-advocates. They're stubborn, they're determined, and they want to see, and they want to meet the world through vision. And if that child has lots of peripheral vision, they may well be able to read sign language as long as the language is presented in the right place, or if they're allowed to hold their head in the right position. I worked with a child in England a long time ago who had no maculas at all. She was about 13 or 14, profoundly deaf, and her mother gave me the biggest kiss because the girl looked right to the side. She was a British Sign Language user. She looked right to the child, to the side of the person signing, but she could understand what they were signing. But in school, they were punishing her. She was in a deaf school. They were punishing her because she wouldn't look when they were signing. And the mother was saying, but she understands. And they were saying, but she must look. And they came for an assessment with me. And I said, she's seeing sign language almost perfectly, as long as you allow her to turn her head right over and just use the left side of her left eye. I mean, what you want is her to get the language. What you shouldn't want is for her to look at you, because that's more important than understanding. You know, we get caught, teachers can get caught in these odd traps where we want the unimportant stuff and we're ignoring the really important stuff. And we're not honoring children to explore and find what works best for them. That girl was very intelligent. I mean, it was just awful that she'd been identified as a very difficult behavior problem, and she wasn't at all. So I don't know your child, and it's very early, but sign language should be an option. Now, if there's visual field, if you go to a deaf-blind conference, some people get communication through their hand. Some people like communication through touch on their back. Some people use sign language, but the person signing has to be a long, long way back. Other people need sign language right up close in their face. Other people need sign language over at the side. Some people need sign language, which normally would be big, like this. They need it made very small. So they talk about the window, and the window of the signs, instead of being more what we would call normal window, has to be a much smaller window. And the interpreter will be signing right like this, and their hands will never go outside the window. It all depends on what kind of visual field is there and is being used. And that obviously takes time. I mean, with a little baby, I would assume that they need everything fairly close and in a small window to start with. Because, you know, vision is the last sense to develop. When a fetus is developing in the womb, all our senses get stimulated, all of them, except vision, because the womb is a completely dark environment. So when a baby is born without charge, a perfectly healthy baby, they have very poor vision, especially distance vision. And it takes months for that vision to improve and the distance they can see, the distance acuity to improve. So at her age, even without charge, she would still be developing vision. And with a good vision teacher, you can come up with all kinds of activities. The little room I showed where you can present things over the child as she's on her back would be very helpful. You can alter the level of the objects so that she can reach them. Then you can move them higher so she has to bring her shoulder up, and she's starting to learn to walk. You know, if a child lies in the little room and they want an object, and if they, I'm watching my slides going, I'm so distracted now because I'm ready for breakfast. If the child likes something, if they like that red disc, like a donut, very close, one day you can move it a little bit, few centimeters higher, and they have to reach further. one day you can put it so high that they have to bring their shoulder off the floor in order to reach it. That's the beginning of walking. You know, because we don't walk with our feet, we walk with our whole body. If your feet walk, the rest of you goes with them. You know, your head goes as well. And the moment the child wants to resist gravity, it's a huge breakthrough, because babies with charge don't want to resist gravity because it's too dangerous. Anyway, I'm getting excited. Bad sign. Because I can talk now till it's your bedtime. Any more questions?
Vielen Dank, David.
Thank you so much, David. And no, there are no questions anymore right now. I couldn't see any. I checked the chat, particularly looking for question on vision. As always, this has been a great presentation and a wonderful closing to today's conference. Thank you very much, David, for taking the time, for getting up so early for us. And as always, it was fantastic. We love listening to you. And as you just said, we could easily listen to you all day. So, again, thank you for making it possible. And all of us are sending very warm greetings and regards from Germany to California. Stay safe, and we all hope that we'll meet again soon via whatever way, video or in real life. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you. Bye-bye and good luck.
Danke, tschüss und